Welcome to Protect What Matters, Estate and Elder Law with Tim Murray.
Welcome to Protect What Matters, Estate and Elder Law with Tim Murray, a Evan Mack lawyer in Indiana. Tim has more than 35 years of experience helping Indiana families with estate planning, probate, and elder law matters. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about choosing an executor or trustee and what actually matters in real life. Tim, my brother, welcome back.
Thank you, Evan. Great to be here again. Thanks.
So Tim, before getting into names and titles, what is an executor or trustee actually responsible for, once the time comes?
An executor, or we also call them personal representatives, two names, same job, or a trustee and a trust. And I'm going to maybe lean more towards trust administration and probate administration, and where they really work more in our environment. That person is going to be in charge of, okay, what happens after a person dies? What do we have to get together? What we have to gather up and list all the assets. We need to find out about their financial accounts. We need to, they're kind of the feet on the ground outside of my office to take care and handle things. Does somebody need to clean out an old barn? Does somebody need to clean out a house? Do we need to meet a real estate broker's office to sign listing agreements, or whatever those jobs and things are? They're doing a lot of the administrative tasks that come along with probate administration, and then also with trust administration. They are responsible to sign checks and pay bills with our supervision. And I want to stress that everything is done with our guidance and supervision, because there's no instruction manual that people can buy ahead of time, usually, that says, hey, this is how you need to be an executor, and this is how you need to be a trustee. So we want to take people by the hand and guide them and make sure they don't make mistakes. They're doing their job well to administer usually the trust or estate of a loved one, and make sure things happen the way they're supposed to, according to the instructions of the loved one and in compliance with Indiana law.
But a lot of families default to choosing the oldest child or the closest relative. In real life, what qualities tend to matter when, more than the family position?
I think that picking the oldest child thing happens a lot, because, they're the oldest, and they're the ones that need to take the bull by the horns and do things. I have an older brother that always had that thrown in his lap, and I always kind of felt sorry for him on the one hand. On the other hand, I got out of doing a lot of stuff over the years because it got dumped on him. So, but nonetheless, just because they're the oldest or a close relative doesn't necessarily make them the best choice to serve in these roles. You want someone, number one, that's going to be honest and loyal to the cause. Basically, the estate and how it's supposed to be handled. Some people don't have instructions. Sometimes we're doing a probate estate and nobody left a will. Nobody left any instructions behind. So we have to follow Indiana law, and we need to make sure that, we have someone that, if they're not very well disposed as far as handling finances and handling matters, that they're teachable. And the biggest thing is that they're amenable, and they're not going to be a rogue and run off on their own and do things. They're going to be loyal. They're going to be, somewhat organized and respectful, I guess, of the process and how things work.
How much weight, should someone give to trustworthiness versus organizational or financial skills when making this choice, though, Tim?
I think trustworthiness, when you compare those two, trustworthiness is more important. We're gonna take care of a lot of the organizational matters. We're gonna, my staff and I, we're gonna take care of the accounting, the inventories. They'll help gather the information, but trustworthiness and having someone that's going to be out there in some deceased person's home, on their property, taking care of things, going to the banks, going to the insurance companies to administer the estate. Having someone in that capacity that is really trustworthy is very, very important over having organizational skills. Absolutely. So.
Can you share a situation where the person, chosen seemed like the obvious choice at the time, but things really didn't kind of play out as everyone thought so?
Yeah, we've had several different occasions where that has happened. I always open to maybe answering a question like that greed's a terrible sin. And people see dollar signs, people think they're entitled, people, one of the biggest things we have happen is after someone dies, people enter their home and things are gone. And it doesn't matter who's in charge. It doesn't matter who's the executor. Someone can get in the home. Maybe they had mom's keys. Maybe they had old Aunt Bessie's, she left her back door unlocked all the time. But whatever it is, things can disappear. And the executors that get appointed sometimes can be the number one offenders of that. And then I have other relatives. I had a situation, I think, where there were 4 sisters, and the one sister that that took care of mom and was very close to mom, more so than the others towards the end, all of a sudden, boom, there's this will that's written by mom that says this sister that nobody likes is the personal representative, the executor, and she's getting just about everything too in the will. So there can be changes like that. And by the way, the other 3 sisters were like, nah, you can't get people together to, let's just meet at the house and split up mom's, personal property, the things that she had that, are sentimental. It's hard to manage those kind of things when you have an executor that no one likes, or that doesn't get along with anybody, or doesn't make the effort to get along with other family members, and be a good family politician. I think that maybe have a ring to it that I like to hear sometimes.
You kind of answered it a bit, but what kind of conflicts tend to come up when an executor or trustee isn't a good fit for this kind of role?
I've had a couple of situations happen where I was actually asked to step in and be the executor. Where
Wow.
One situation, there was a granddaughter who was appointed to be the executor, and her aunts and uncles gave her such a hard time that she couldn't handle it and the stress. And so I was asked to step in and be the personal representative, the executor in the estate, to clean things up, to straighten people out, and get things processed. I'm involved in another one right now where there had been 2 executors appointed before me. One was a daughter when the guy supposedly didn't have a will. And then another one was the brother when when a new will that he executed just a few days before he died popped up. And so they were both appointed and disqualified or removed. And then I was asked to step in because nobody is getting along. There's 2 different things that are instructions that people want to follow. And there's a will contest going on. They're taking care of that. And I'm the executor over here, having to manage the assets, run a business, and take care of those things, because basically we don't know if the deceased gentleman was persuaded to change and write a will differently than what he wanted to have happen before, and just leaving assets to his daughter. So things like that can happen with poor planning on the part of a person who then dies and really doesn't leave anything in place to do things. I think it throws things into contention because, like I said, people are mourning the loss of a loved one, and then they're looking at, hey, what did the guy leave us? And we're all human, and anybody who doesn't think that is probably from another planet. Okay.
Right.
But sooner or later, those thoughts are going to come into our thinking after someone dies. And it's just natural. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just natural. Well, Uncle Ed died, dang, sure did like that guy. I went fishing with him every summer, I wonder what he left me. I just think it's natural to think those things. We just don't always think them out loud, but it lends to the entitlement and the greed thing if we don't have a good handle on ourselves, I think sometimes.
How does the distance and availability factor into this decision, especially for families who don't, all live in the same area anymore?
I think if we have someone appointed to be a trustee or an executor who lives out of state, we don't have the same rules for an executor that we do for a trustee. If you're a trustee, you can live anywhere in the world and try to manage things through technology and the internet and things like that. But if you're in a probate situation and you're the executor and you live out of state, there's a bond requirement, so that you have to post a bond. And the reason is this: if you remove assets from the state of Indiana, and we're not going to get them back because you live in California, uh, Indiana court doesn't have jurisdiction in California to do anything. But if you have a bond posted, then we can at least recover the bond. If I think I had a few years ago, I had a an executor. I always want to call him a personal representative also sometimes. An executor who lived in California, and he wanted to move all the money from the estate checking account into an account out in California, and I wasn't having any of that. He kept insisting upon it and couldn't understand why. Basically, his excuse was that he didn't trust anybody here. He didn't trust me as the attorney who was representing him. He didn't trust any of that, and he wanted to move all the money out into an account that he could control exclusively. And that's really contrary to Indiana law to do that. And he wasn't having any of that, to the point where we had our difficulties, and we split up and moved apart from each other. So I basically fired him. And he was that adamant about doing the wrong things that I said, well, I can't continue to represent you then. And I have to do that on a rare occasion. I don't like to do it, but I also have to think of, what's happening here in my office and protecting, my people and myself and our continued success here with our business. So I'm not sure I answered that question specifically, but I was getting close, I think.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, but Tim, when does it make sense to consider, naming a professional or corporate executor or trustee instead of that family member, kind of like how you stepped in before?
I have, well, kind of like when I stepped in before, those examples, you get an objective third party who doesn't have any interest in things. They're not a family member, they're not a close friend. Sometimes people have no one to appoint to these positions. I have people who have no family. They maybe only have a couple of friends, or the people they are related to, it's like, well, I don't trust them. I'm not going to appoint any of my family because they'll just, steal everything. And I don't have any friends. Mr. Murray, who would you recommend that I appoint? And when I have those times and I have those issues, then a corporate fiduciary would be the official title. But maybe you consider appointing an attorney. Maybe you consider appointing a CPA. Maybe you have someone that's done your taxes all these years. Someone you can trust and you have trusted in the past. Maybe there's a local bank that has a trust department. Okay, they would take care of trust administrations, and many of them also are accepting and will be acceptable to being an executor in a probate estate. So there's those options that I point people towards to be able to handle those situations. And I think it almost always makes them feel more at ease, because I think they thought there was not going to be anybody they could depend on or anyone they could trust, because their friends and family members they run with them, but they don't want to trust them with their assets and their money. So
how important is it to talk through this choice, with the person being named ahead of time rather than just putting it in writing?
I think it's real important, and I encourage my clients to do that when they're writing a will, when they're writing their trust, and I please have a conversation with the people that you're appointing to be your executor. I've had recently, I had an elderly couple that were appointed to be the trustee after a woman died, so she's no longer the trustee, and she had appointed Jack and Jill, and I mean they're almost each of them are almost 80 years old. They couldn't imagine why the deceased woman appointed them. They're not related. They were just good friends. They didn't want to do it. They lived, for us, about an hour and a half to 2 hours away over in Illinois. They were out of state. They didn't know where her documents were. They had, they were just taken aback by it. So we talked to one of the daughters who was very close to Mom, was checking in with her every day, had been paying her bills, knew where all the documents were, knew where all her bank statements were, knew where all her financial records. And the older couple said, why don't we just, let her do things, and we'll appoint her, because they have that power in the trust. We'll appoint her as co-trustee, and then she can take care of things. And that's what we ended up doing. But there was no conversation with them. There was nothing said. And I've had that happen several times when we appoint a family member to be, not just a family member, anyone, but more often than not a family member, to be our executor in our will. Well, nobody ever told me. Well, I don't know. Why would they appoint me? I don't know how to do this. I don't know where any, Bob's financial dollar. What do I mean? I got to go into his house and dig through all his stuff and look for this, all these things. I don't know where those things are, so it, you know, have a conversation. If you don't want to do it, bring him into my office. We'll sit down and have the conversation together. We'll go over some of the things they're going to be expected to do. Where do you keep your documents? Just so they have some information and knowledge so that all this flows smoothly, because that's the whole purpose of estate planning, is what you want to do flows smoothly. And we remove the problems and the tension and the anxiety that people are going to have after you die, and make things happen easily in the transitions that we're going to make.
So, Tim, for someone weighing multiple, good options and feeling unsure, how do you usually suggest thinking through that decision in a practical way?
Well, I like to think, and I guess maybe go back to some of the things we've already talked about, Evan. Who's going to be trustworthy? Who's going to be loyal to the cause? Are we going to have somebody running around out there that, hey, they come in my office and they said, hey, well, last week I sold a car. I sold old Bob's car, and what am I supposed to do with the money? We don't like those things happening without knowledge ahead of time. We don't want to be surprised by somebody who sold a car. Maybe they sold it to Bob's brother. It's worth $1,500, but we sold it to Bob's brother for $500 because that's what we knew he'd want to do. You can't do those things. Those are the things that we want to keep from happening, because if there's other heirs in Bob's estate, well, what happens if the executor sold Bob's car for $500? It should have sold for $15, because Evan is Bob's brother who inherits. Well, instead of getting a third of $1,500, I'm only getting a third of $500 now. So there's laws and rules about those things, and we have to follow them to make sure everything's fair and everyone's treated correctly and with respect and due diligence under the law. So you just got to have someone that cares and is going to be trustworthy. So
Good stuff, Tim. Thank you for your time.
Sure. Thank you, Evan. Always good time.
All right, guys. That's it for today's episode of Protect What Matters, Estate and Elder Law with Tim Murray, a Evan Mack lawyer in Indiana. If you'd like to learn more about Tim Murray and the work he does at Murray Law, you can visit tmurraylaw.com or call 574-946-7819. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe to the show, and share this episode with someone who might need it as well. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.